Hi everyone, welcome to the IMA ComLab YouTube channel. In this week's workshop, we're going to build an artist portfolio, and we're going to do it using CSS Flexbox. And before we begin, this workshop is going to use basics of HTML and CSS, so if you still don't feel quite comfortable with these, it will be best if you go and revisit some of the previous videos from this channel for a refresher. And if you're here for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscription button below for new and awesome videos. Why not? Let's begin. As an example, I'll be making a gallery website for Keith Haring, a brilliant artist and activist from the 80s New York scene. The link to that project is available as a GitHub repo, but follow through if you really want to find out how this layout happened. So first, let's go over some concepts around Flexbox. Flexbox has been introduced to CSS a few years ago as a solution to the problem of positioning content on the page. Previously, web standards weren't designed to handle more complex interfaces, as HTML was designed to be a document format rather than an interface markup. Designers had to use tricks and hacks to do things as simple as centering elements on the page or distributing them evenly. Flexbox solves that problem by giving a set of settings for both containers and the elements inside those containers. And this is perhaps the most important thing to remember as you go. There are two types of settings in Flexbox: those for the container and those for the elements inside, or for parents and children, whichever way you prefer to call it. Everything starts with applying the display flex property to the container. And I can't stress this enough. Most of the confusion happens because people try to assign the flex property to children as opposed to the container. By assigning the property to an item, you turn it into a flex box, and that means all the items inside that box will be distributed accordingly to the rule of distribution you give to that box. There are a number of ways you can distribute content, both horizontally and vertically. Let's take a closer look into that now. Let's start with the horizontal one, because you will use it for justifying both text and content most often. The property appropriately has a name, justify-content. It defaults to flex start, which is on the left. In case you're working with languages that read right to left, you might have to make extra adjustments. You can change this property to position content at the horizontal center or to the right, which in Flexbox is signified by flex end. There are also three extremely useful ways to distribute content evenly. The first one is space evenly, which will leave an equal amount of space between items and between items and edges of the box. Another one is space around. That one leaves equal width space on both sides of each item. And then there's space between, which leaves space only between items, but not on the edges of the box. You can distribute content vertically as well. For that, you will use the align items property, at least if you're working with only one line of items. There's also align content, and we'll get to the difference between the two in a moment. Just like in justify content, you can align items at the flex start, center, and flex end. Another cool feature of Flexbox is that you can change the direction of the flow of content. By default, it's flex direction row, but we can change it to flex direction column. See? This is especially useful when working with responsive web design, when you need to adjust content to a vertical screen. One thing you need to keep in mind when you use flex direction column is that it flips the axis entirely. That is, horizontal properties become vertical properties and the other way around. That means, for example, you'll have to use align items, which is usually a vertical property, to adjust content on a horizontal axis. Still, same values are available: flex start, center, and flex end. Okay, now let's talk about subproperties for items. The ones that you're going to probably use most often is flex. It is a bit idiomatic, and it takes some getting used to, but once you see the most common usages of it, you'll be able to use Flexbox to its fuller potential. So flex is actually a shorthand for three other properties: flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. All of these determine how much horizontal space the item is going to take, taking into account all the other items in a row, as well as the remaining space within the row. Let's get right into examples. I set flex grow to 1 for just that one item, and this made it take up a maximum amount of remaining space without shrinking the other items. Now I'd set flex shrink to 1 on the first item, but nothing happened. And this is because the third property, flex basis, defaults to width of an item, which I fixed to 90 pixels. To make flex shrink effective, I have to also change the flex basis to 0%. Now the first item takes no more space than absolutely necessary. Most often though, you will see flex property used in a shorthand. An easy way to distribute space evenly is to simply type flex 1. You can also determine the width of each element as a percentage of the container like this. Flex 0,025%. The first 0 stands for flex grow, the second 0 stands for flex shrink, and the 25% stands for flex basis. Notice that the items didn't wrap by default, and the fifth element is outside of the box now. To fix this, you need to add a flex wrap property to the container. Now it shows up more or less correctly. It would still be nice to have the rows aligned more nicely. That's where the align content property comes to play. Remember when we used align items to distribute content vertically? That's because we only had one row of content. Align items only aligns items within the same row. Here we have 2 rows and we want to distribute those, so it's not going to do the job. That's why here, instead of align items, we're going to use align content. There are plenty of other ways to use Flexbox. To see all of them, I strongly recommend you take a look into the Guide for Flexbox by CSS Tricks. Link is at the description. Now let's do some live coding.
Okay, so we start off with a very basic HTML setup. We have a heading for a Keith Haring gallery, and we have a main element with a class container, and we have 5 items, and each of those items is a different piece of art by Keith Haring. And on the front end is gonna look very, very basic, very kind of like a 94 page. And you can see that all the content is aligned to the left. We only have Times New Roman here, and the image sizes come up with their original dimensions. So it gives a very messy kind of visual effect, which is actually very easy to fix with Flexbox. So to start off, let's maybe fix the main container a little bit at first. And we're gonna do that addressing a class dot container. And we're gonna set the width to always be 80% of the available screen size. And we're gonna center it using margin auto. You can see now that the page elements, like the content of it, is a little bit more towards the center, but the heading still isn't like that. So that's another thing we're gonna fix. H1, so that's gonna be text align center. We're gonna increase the font size a little bit. Okay. And now here comes the magic. We've been trying to align those items, but now they're still coming up one after another. And the way to align them is, of course, through display flex. Sorry, display flex. What's going to happen now? What's happening now is that we have all those images come up in one row, still with original image sizes, but at least they're aligned together. So that's some progress, of course. So the next step is that we don't want them to come up like this because we don't want the users to have to scroll horizontally. This is not a desirable kind of interaction most often. So let's set the flex wrap property to wrap. Here we go. I mean, some of the images come up next to each other, but others come up one after another, and this is because the image sizes are still kind of stretching our items out of proportion. So in order to fix that, we need to fix the sizes of the items themselves. And the property to use here is gonna be flex, as we mentioned before. So we're gonna use flex, and I want those images to always take up 1/3 of the available space in the container. So this is gonna be 0, 0, and 33.3%. Unfortunately, there is no better way to kind of calculate that exactly, but that's not really the point, and it's not really noticeable for the user. So it's fine. So nothing's changed yet, and that's a little bit of a problem. And this is because unless we change the size of the image and force them to always take up the 100% of the flex basis, the images are gonna stretch the item itself, and we're not gonna get the layout that we want. So to do that, we're gonna have to address all the images within any of the items. So this is gonna be dot item img. Every img element that's inside of an item. And we're gonna set the width to 100%. So this is gonna be 100% of the flex basis of the item in this case. Here we go. So this looks a little more acceptable, I guess. Still, there are some layout adjustments that we could make. For example, the images come up next to each other, which doesn't really give a good visual effect. And we still have the image ratios that aren't really sorted out, and we would want them to come up a little more evenly. At least personally, I think that would be best. So let's add a bit of a margin to the item. 1%. And let's see what happens. Well, this happened, and this broke our layout entirely because right now each of those items is actually taking not 33.3%, but 35.3%, because it also has 1% of margin on the left and 1% of margin on the right. So in order to fix that, we're gonna have to do a quick calculation and adjust this percentage to 31.3%, and then the margin is gonna take 2% altogether on both sides, and this is all gonna add up nicely. So here we go. And now pretty much the only thing layout-wise that I really want to fix is those image sizes. So there's really no right or wrong way to fix this situation, because you're either going to have to cut a little bit of some images on either sides, or you're going to have to give some of those images a bit of a frame so that all of them can be contained. So there's a setting for that. It's called object fit. And I'm going to use cover, which is going to cut out some parts of some images, but the image is always going to fill out all of its available space. And I'm going to fix the height of each of those images to 350 pixels because I figured that this is going to be the value that's going to work well. And this has solved our problem, basically. This looks decent now. And now, just for some housekeeping, I'm also going to adjust fonts a little bit. So for item P, I'm going to make it Helvetica. In the center. And I'm also gonna use a nicer font for the header, because right now it's Times New Roman and it's not really cute. I picked a Google font. It's called Gochi Hand. That's going to really fit the spirit of Keith Haring's aesthetic. So I can use just the standard CSS import like this. I can just copy and paste this line of code on top of my style sheet, and then I can use the font in my other style. So I'm gonna make it font family, Gochi Hand, and always give a fallback. I'm gonna give a fallback of just sans serif, which usually is Helvetica or Arial, depending on the OS that you're on. So here we go. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You can also add a little bit of a box shadow. You can rearrange those a little bit. One thing that I also wanted to try is to make those images respond to different width of the screen, because this is often a challenge that you're going to run into with web development, where your page looks really good on desktop, but it doesn't really look good on mobile. And let's check how it looks like on mobile right now. The heading looks decent, but these images, yeah, this just looks really vile, and we need to fix this. So the way to do that is we're going to write a media query. App media, screen, and for all the screens that have a maximum width of 768 pixels, which covers most mobile phones and some tablets, you're gonna have to check those dimensions a little more, but that works for the time being. And for all of those devices, in our container element, we're going to change the direction of the flow of our content. So there was a nice property for that, and it's called flex direction column, and that's it. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. All right, so we're done with our first portfolio page, and if you have any further questions, comments, or if you run into technical issues later on with your project, let us know. We're always on Discord. You can find us on Slack, on email, and don't forget to hit the subscription button and check out our new videos. We post every week on Wednesdays, and the next one is going to be about basics of JavaScript, and stay tuned also for live coding workshops and coding challenges on Discord, as well as Discord parties. So good luck with your projects, and I'll see you next week. Bye.